The Hoenn region. It's a place that's incredibly high regarded no matter what type of Pokemon fan you are, and its primary game, Pokemon Emerald, also happens to be the most technically advanced game in the Pokemon ROM hacking scene, allowing players to practically take it apart and rebuild it into almost anything they want, ignoring most of the limitations that once held the scene back for many years. So in today's video, I'm here to break down what I believe to be the top 10 Pokemon Emerald ROM hacks that either improve the Hoenn region in a significant way, or use it as a base for tons of new features and content. So obviously, I won't be including hacks like Mariomon or Glazed, that, despite having used Emerald as their base, take place in a much different region that barely resembles the base game. Let's take it from the top with Pokemon Emerald Z, a relatively simple hack with a pretty unique gimmick, and that would be the inclusion of over 100 new Pokemon spread out across the Hoenn region. Now, I'm a huge fan of Fakemon, and am easily drawn to just about any project that includes them. And I have to say, Emerald Z definitely doesn't disappoint with that side of the gameplay, as I found each of their designs to be visually appealing, and all of them to be fun to use in battle. And there's even online documentation with information about each of their learnable moves, abilities, and evolution requirements. The only thing I wish was improved upon would be the early game variety, as I felt there was a pretty big lack of them before the third gym. But of course, this isn't just default Pokemon Emerald with some Fakemon thrown in, as there are of course a few other noticeable changes. First, the hack also contains around 400 extra Pokemon from all 9 generations. So between official and unofficial, you'll have a ton of options to build your team, and thanks to the limited deck size, the variety won't feel overwhelming either. Outside of just the Pokemon though, all gym leaders and Elite Four members have been shuffled around so that you aren't going in the exact same order as you probably have dozens of times already. Overall, Emerald Z is a pretty simple hack that I think you'll enjoy if you're a casual player looking to play with a huge variety of new and official Pokemon, without an insane difficulty level or an overwhelming number of new mechanics. Up next is Pokemon Emerald Imperium, a hack I'm sure many of you have heard of before, but just in case you haven't, the best way to describe it is Radical Red but Hoenn. So you can expect harder boss battles, a huge Pokemon variety from all 9 generations, and just about every feature you might need to reduce grinding being easily accessible. Now, I have to say that there definitely is a ton of effort put into this hack's Pokemon battles and quality of life changes. However, I also feel that there isn't enough that separates it from its inspiration, Radical Red. Most of the balance changes and early game Pokemon options are pretty identical, which to some people might be fine if you just want RR in another region. But to those of us who have played RR dozens of times already, it's not going to feel very different. The hack also only features a single dedicated difficulty mode, with its easy mode just lowering enemy boss levels by 2 and allowing the bag and shift mode to be used in battle. To be honest, unless you're looking for difficult battles and all 9 generations of Pokemon, specifically in the Hoenn region, I don't think there's much of a reason to play this hack over Radical Red, especially since it also doesn't include any significant map or story changes in its current version. However, the developer does plan on adding a lot of things I mentioned it lacked, and more. So it's definitely a hack that will see a lot of improvement in the future. At number 8, we have a bit of an older hack called Emerald Genesis. The first thing that stands out about this hack would be the upgraded overworld. The second you step outside, you're greeted with a much different world color than you're used to. Though, up until the first gym, this might just seem like a new tile set and nothing else. But then you'll arrive in Dewford Town, where you'll be greeted with a new area south of the village with 2 new side quests attached to it. This repeats itself somewhat often throughout the story, as you'll find new maps to explore, alongside a new art style enhancing the ones that already exist. But as appreciated as they are, there's much more to a Pokemon game than a few visual enhancements. So starting with the Pokemon, you aren't overwhelmed with a full national dex and 10 plus encounters per route. Instead, the regional dex consists of options evolutions from the first 7 generations, with many receiving changes to their base stats and evolution levels. As for the difficulty, it's been somewhat increased from the base games, as gym leaders have had their levels, Pokemon, and coverage options improved. What I enjoyed the most about the Pokemon battles, though, was that they didn't feel impossibly hard like in many other improvement hacks. Instead, just giving me an issue here and there that didn't leave me needing to meticulously plan for every single boss battle. Finally, there are a handful of quality of life changes and modern mechanics, like the physical special split, infinite TMs, the fairy type, and even the Dex Nav. Overall, Emerald Genesis is a very vanilla plus ROM hack with an updated art style that gives the region a much needed facelift, and a difficulty level both friendly to casual players and intermediate Nuzlockers. So despite its lack of crazy features many newer Emerald hacks have, the fact that it actually makes an attempt to improve the Hoenn experience as a whole definitely earns it a spot on this list. Now, if every hack on this list so far had one thing in common, it would be that they don't really make any effort to change the story. Sure, you have various maps and other visual changes, but it's all been the same plot. This hack, however, actually attempts to change that, and its name would be Hyper Emerald. Originally a Chinese ROM hack that's been recently translated to English, Hyper Emerald takes you through the Hoenn region with a new story that's a bit of a mix between the current one and, well, a bunch of other things. Unfortunately, I can't really praise the story for anything but attempting to change it, because it isn't very good, shoving every antagonist group and rival into a single game. And there isn't really any build-up to that either, since at the very start, you're greeted with a cutscene showing you, well, everything I just complained about. But I still appreciate some changes to the story, as I much prefer people at least trying to be creative, rather than just leaving it as it is. So, what about the gameplay? Well, Hyper Emerald does at least shine there, with a huge variety of Pokemon from the first 8 generations, and a handful of quality of life features like the EXP All. You'll also have 2 different difficulty modes. Despite its flaws, the hack does seem pretty good, so why not place it higher on the list? Well, the biggest problem with the hack would have to be that it's not very stable, and does come with a decent number of bugs. Obviously, they aren't all over the game, or else I wouldn't even be recommending it, but they are hidden in a few locations that, unless you do your own research about, will come and bite you. But overall, Hyper Emerald is a pretty good hack that's one of the more unique ways to experience the Hoenn region, and if you're able to ignore its issues, I definitely think a lot of fun can be had with it. At number 6 is Recharged Emerald. Now, this hack has a much different design philosophy than almost every other project on this list, as rather than looking to add tons of new Pokemon or drastically change the region or story, it simply seeks to improve upon everything that was already there. Starting with the graphical enhancements, you'll first have Pokemon following you in the overworld, and every NPC now resembling the style of Fire Red and Leaf Green. Combine that with the dozens of new UIs and updated Pokemon sprites, your adventure through the Hoenn region will feel a lot more alive and a lot more colorful. But moving on to the actual gameplay, Recharged Emerald includes one of my favorite features in any Pokemon ROM hack, and that would be built-in battle speed up, allowing you to still enjoy the music and sound effects without the limitations of the default battle speed. To make battling even more interesting though, you'll start your adventure with the choice between 3 different difficulty modes, and the option to play with Nuzlocke rules, increased experience gain, and level caps. For the base game, that pretty much wraps up the changes. But there is also a second patch for the hack, known as the Rebalanced version. This patch does exactly what you'd expect, adding a ton of balance changes to Pokemon base stats, typings, ability options, and learnable moves. The only downside to the Rebalanced version is that it doesn't allow you to trade with the official games like the default versions do. Overall, I think Recharged Emerald provides an experience very close to the base game, but with enough changes that you won't feel like you're replaying them for the 100th time. And if the hack in its current state does sound underwhelming, then don't worry, as the creator is constantly providing updates to it as they discover new advancements that would benefit the project. Moving on to number 5, we have Inclement Emerald. Now, back in the day, this hack was considered the Emerald equivalent of Radical Red, with almost every Pokemon from the first 7 generations available, Mega Evolutions, and a multitude of other quality of life features. But there are many aspects of the hack that still separate itself from Radical Red, and despite it not receiving an update in over 3 years, there are also many design choices that still allow it to hold up. Similarly to RR, many Pokemon have received a ton of buffs to their stats, ability options, and learnable moves. But unlike RR, these changes felt a lot more simple and grounded, with most Pokemon closely resembling their official power levels. And if that sounds disappointing, then don't worry, because thanks to the massive variety of TMs and every Pokemon Center having a free move tutor that expands after each gym badge, you'll never feel like any of your Pokemon are useless. You'll also find many other features like the EXP 3 difficulty modes, a customizable level cap, and dozens of other quality of life that most of us would expect in just about every other difficulty hack. Unlike RR though, and many other hacks that try to mimic it, Inclement Emerald introduces a handful of new areas. Some are off to the side, while others, like a beach below Dewford, exist to give smaller places a much bigger identity. But they also make the encounter list feel way less cramped, as well as just give you even more options for your Nuzlocke or other limited challenge runs. Overall, I think Inclement Emerald is one of the best difficulty hacks ever made, as it's incredibly fun and fair from both a normal playthrough and Nuzlocke perspective, but also lacks the feeling of just being another Radical Red clone. And despite it lacking a full national dex, I think the hack does a much better job at utilizing the Pokemon it does have over many others that do actually include every Pokemon. Coming in at number 4 is a hack I'm sure that many of you have been sitting here waiting for it to appear on this list, and that would obviously be Pokemon Emerald Sea Glass. One of the most popular ROM hacks released in 2024, Sea Glass completely revamps the Hoenn region with a brand new art style highly inspired by that of the first and second generation. But of course, no longer bound to the restrictions of those games' home consoles, the hack is allowed to look absolutely stunning, from a colorful overworld with Pokemon following behind you, to a dazzling battle scene brought to life with new battle backgrounds and Pokemon sprites. But as beautiful as I found the art style to be, there's only so much I can say about it that can't be equally understood by just showing it off as background footage. So let's move on to the gameplay. Unlike most games on this list, Sea Glass takes a much more vanilla plus approach to the balancing, with the difficulty of gym leaders and other boss battles being only slightly increased, and Pokemon balance changes being pretty minimal compared to many other Emerald enhancement hacks. But you will have an expanded Pokemon variety, being the first 3 generations, with a handful of later additions, as well as a dozen modern features like the EXP, the Fairy type, and optional level caps. One criticism I've seen used against Sea Glass is that taking away its visual enhancements leaves you with a pretty underwhelming gameplay experience, which is a take I very much disagree with. It's kind of strange to try and judge something by taking away its primary identity, and even in doing so, I still think the hack has enough features and changes that, alongside all its visual enhancements, creates a much more enjoyable experience than almost every other Emerald ROM hack I've played. Altogether, Sea Glass is easily one of the best ways to experience Hoenn, as either a casual player looking for a laid-back adventure, or a more intermediate Nuzlocker looking for a fun challenge that's still far from crazy. Alright, so with just how many Emerald hacks exist, there are a couple of them that many people hold in high regard, or a few others that still deserve an honorable mention, despite not making this list. The first ones are Run and Bun and Emerald Kaizo, that I'm grouping together because I pretty much have the same thing to say about both. I do think that they are well-made hacks, with tons of thought gone into each battle, Pokemon option, and balance change, but I also think that they're made for a very specific set of players that make up less than 1% 90% of the entire community. So despite their success in the Nuzlocking YouTuber scene, I don't think either of them deserve to be here on this list. The second would be Pokemon Pisces, a hack I was going to put on this list, but later decided not to. You see, I think Pisces is an incredibly well-made ROM hack, with tons of new Pokemon, a brand new story, and a completely reimagined Hoenn region. However, I feel its changes to the region are a little too drastic. Not in a bad way at all, but just to the point where I feel it leans more towards a new region hack than an Emerald or Hoenn enhancement hack. The final is Emerald Legacy. Like I stated in my original review of the Legacy series, I do think it's a good hack that does accomplish what it's going for. However, compared to every other Hoenn hack available, it's extremely underwhelming, lacking any significant changes to its story and visuals, and also missing a ton of features included in almost every ROM hack released after 2020, like infinite TMs for example. So while I do think Emerald Legacy is a good hack, I still don't think it's a project that I can put above any of the others on this list. But the next three hacks are ones that I believe from both a personal and objective standpoint are the three greatest Hoenn region hacks ever created. So coming in at number 3 is a very interesting project called Parallel Emerald. The primary gimmick of this hack was to reimagine the Hoenn region in an alternate or parallel universe. So while you do still begin in Little Root Town and you are still on a journey to collect 8 gym badges, you'll find that every map in the region has been expanded, redesigned, or completely remade from scratch. So also alongside a dozen new routes and towns, this is probably the biggest and most expansive version of the Hoenn region I've ever played through. And while there aren't any groundbreaking story changes, you will find yourself facing off against new gym leaders, rivals, and Elite Four members. But as always, as exciting as they are, map changes aren't everything. First, Parallel Emerald has 2 defined difficulty modes. I chose to play on normal, and I'll be honest, it was one of the most balanced difficulty curves I've ever experienced in an enhancement hack. From the first gym leader, fighting enemies only slightly harder than those in the mainline games, slowly moving up to full teams packed with strong Pokemon and good coverage options. Not once did I feel there was an insane difficulty jump going from one boss to the next. As for the Pokemon, you'll have every one of them available up until the release of Legends Arceus. And thanks to the new maps I talked about before, the variety won't feel overwhelming, with only around 5 to 6 unique grass encounters for each area. But even more impressively is the fact that on top of all the features I've already mentioned, this hack even comes with a massive amount of Pokemon changes. Combine all of that with quality of life like the EXP All and easy fast travel, Parallel Emerald is one of the most interesting and enjoyable ways to explore the Hoenn region. At number 2 though is one of the most technically impressive Pokemon ROM hacks I've ever seen. A project that creates a gameplay experience unlike almost any other, and that would be Elite Redux. First and foremost, the primary gimmick is that Pokemon can now have up to 4 active abilities at the same time, creating a much crazier battle experience that gives all your team members a much more defined identity. Alongside that, though, is over 200 new abilities, alongside every move, ability, and almost every Pokemon up to the 8th generation. Oh, and not to mention dozens of new custom forms and Mega Evolutions. But we're far from done, as every canon Pokemon has been buffed or rebalanced, alongside tons of quality of life that allows you to easily customize them at just about any point in your journey. One of my favorite parts about the game would have to be just how customizable the difficulty is, with 3 different difficulty modes, customizable level caps, and the ability to disable EVs. The only somewhat negative thing I could say about the hack is that I do feel a lot of the changes can feel pretty overwhelming. This is much more of a personal opinion though, and not something that really affects the placement of it on this list. But I do feel it needs to be said that if you aren't already super familiar with harder Pokemon battles and difficulty hacks in general, then you might have a hard time enjoying the hack. Overall, I think Elite Redux is objectively one of the best Pokemon Emerald ROM hacks ever created, and with future updates that plan to add new towns, routes, and even story changes, I think it'll soon become the best Emerald ROM hack. But for the number one spot, I chose a hack that I feel best allows almost any kind of player to enjoy. Whether you're looking for harder battles, a bigger roster of Pokemon, graphical updates, or even a massive post-game. This is Open World Emerald. As the title of the hack suggests, its main focus is allowing the player to choose anywhere to start their adventure, and work their way through the region's gym leaders in any way they desire. So every wild Pokemon, trainer, and boss battle will scale to your team's level or your current level cap. Unlike some of the open world hacks in the past, this isn't the Hoenn region you remember, as many areas have been upgraded with either manual changes or customizable visual enhancements using the in-game season system. But its biggest overworld accomplishment is easily the inclusion of the Sevi Islands as a complete second region, with 8 extra gym badges to collect. And yes, you can choose to begin your adventure there as well. Even with all that though, Open World Emerald somehow manages to shine even brighter with its massive amount of gameplay customization. From customizable battle speeds, mechanics, battle music, difficulty levels, and so much more, this hack allows you to create the perfect gameplay experience in more ways than I thought were even possible. You can even customize up to what generation of Pokemon you want to play with. To top it all off, you'll also have just about every feature and quality of life you'd expect from a modern enhancement hack, alongside dozens of other player upgrades, achievements, and in-game documentation. Open World Emerald provides a near limitless experience, and with everything I mentioned, I think it definitely deserves the title of the greatest Hoenn region ROM hack currently available. But that's just about going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to stay up to date with all the upcoming releases and updates to Pokemon ROM hacks, then definitely be sure to subscribe. Thank you to my channel members for their continued support, and have a nice rest of your day.